Welcome, everyone. I'm Dusky Nights, and before we begin, I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it for you? Drop a comment below. Also, I want to know what kind of stories you enjoy, and make sure to listen till the end. The first time I saw my name scratched into the bark of a tree, I assumed it was a coincidence, a trick of the mind. Maybe another Ethan had been here before me. But when I found it again, deeper in the forest, paired with the words, "Do you remember me?" my blood ran cold. I had never been here before. At least, not that I could recall. I work as a night ranger at Black Hollow National Park. A simple job, mostly monitoring cameras, keeping an eye on any lost hikers, and making sure no one sneaks in after dark. It is a lonely shift, but I do not mind. The forest at night is a different world, a quieter, heavier place where time stretches and sounds carry in unnatural ways. My co-worker Ryan works at the main gate while I stay in the ranger's station. We check in with each other every hour. It is an easy routine. At least, it was until I found the writing on the tree. That night, my shift started like any other, a thermos full of coffee, my radio crackling every now and then, and a grainy black and white view of the park from the camera monitors. Midnight came and went. A quiet night. Until 2:37 a.m., when something on the northwest camera caught my attention. A person. No backpack, no flashlight, standing just outside the tree line. I leaned closer, trying to make out details. The figure did not move. They stood there, frozen, facing the camera. Their clothes looked old, faded, almost like they had been out in the elements for too long. I reached for my radio, about to inform Ryan, when the figure did something that made my stomach drop. They lifted their hand and pointed directly at the lens. My name was on the tree behind them. Ethan. A cold wave of unease washed over me. How did they know my name? I blinked, and the camera glitched. When the image cleared, the figure was gone. I rewound the footage, but it was as if they had never been there. I had never seen interference like that before. I did not want to step outside, but I had to. I grabbed my flashlight, checking my radio one last time. "Ryan, you there?" His response was immediate. "Yeah, all good." Bored out of my mind. "You?" I hesitated, staring at the dark outline of the trees just beyond the station. Thought I saw something weird on the cameras. Probably nothing, but I am going to check it out. Ryan chuckled, oblivious to the dread coiling in my chest. "You better not get eaten by a bear, man." I forced a laugh and stepped outside. The air was heavy, damp, with the scent of moss and earth. My boots crunched against the dirt as I approached the tree. The closer I got, the more I saw the details I had missed on the camera. The name was carved deep, jagged, as if done in a hurry. Below it, the words, "Do you remember me?" The letters looked fresh, the bark still raw and bleeding sap. My fingers hovered over the grooves, a faint, twisted familiarity stirring in the back of my mind. Before I could dwell on it, a branch snapped behind me. I turned, flashlight beam cutting through the trees. Nothing, just the quiet rustling of leaves. Then, in the distance, footsteps, slow, deliberate. My breath hitched. "Ryan, I think someone is out here." Silence. The radio was dead. Static filled the channel where his voice should have been. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I backed away, moving toward the station, my heart hammering against my ribs. The flashlight flickered. The shadows between the trees deepened, shifting, stretching toward me. Then, just as suddenly as they started, the footsteps stopped. I stood there frozen, waiting, listening. A whisper cut through the silence. "You do not remember." "But I do." The voice was not Ryan's. It was not even close. It was mine. Panic surged through me. I bolted for the station, slamming the door behind me and locking it. My hands shook as I reached for the radio. "Ryan, are you there?" Nothing. Just static. I checked the monitors. The northwest camera was black. I switched to another. The same thing. Each feed cut out one by one until only one remained. The feed showed the ranger's station, my station. I was on the screen, standing in the doorway, but I was not moving. My reflection in the camera was not mirroring me. It was just standing there, staring at me. And then it smiled. The power flickered. The room plunged into darkness. The last thing I heard before the radio cut out completely was my own voice whispering, "Do you remember me now?" The air inside the station turned suffocating, thick with something unseen, something that felt like it was pressing against me from all sides. I fumbled for my flashlight, my fingers trembling as I flicked it on. The weak beam barely cut through the darkness, but it was enough to reveal the monitor. The screen still showed the doorway, but my reflection was gone. My breath came in shallow gasps as I turned slowly, expecting to see something standing behind me, but there was nothing, just the empty station. I staggered back, pressing myself against the desk, my pulse a frantic drumbeat in my ears. Then the radio crackled. "Ethan." My name, drawn out, distorted. A voice that was mine, but not mine. The flashlight flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, I felt it. A presence, close, closer than it should be. I spun toward the door, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. The knob rattled. My stomach twisted in terror. It was trying to get in, or worse, trying to get out. I backed away, heart hammering, mind racing. The writing on the tree, the figure on the camera, the voice on the radio. It all pointed to one thing. Something was here, and it knew me. The door creaked open. Not fast, not slow, just enough to reveal the inky void beyond. My breath caught in my throat. A shape moved in the darkness, a silhouette, familiar. My hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms. I could not run. I could not look away. The figure took a step forward. The light from my flashlight caught its face, and my mind shattered. It was me, not a twin, not a look-alike. Me. Down to the scar on my chin, the slight crook in my nose. But there was something wrong. The smile was too wide, the eyes too dark, too hollow. It tilted its head, watching me with an amusement I did not understand. Then, in a voice that was mine, but empty, it whispered, "You should have remembered." The world tilted. My vision blurred. I stumbled back as the thing that wore my face reached for me. The last thing I remember is the feeling of ice-cold fingers brushing against my skin before everything went black. When I woke up, I was outside, lying at the base of the tree. The carving was gone. No sign it had ever been there. The radio on my belt crackled to life. "Ethan, you there? You missed check-in, man?" Ryan's voice. Normal, unaware. I swallowed hard, staring at my shaking hands. "Yeah," I croaked. "I am here." But as I got to my feet, I saw something in the dirt beside me. A single footprint, not mine. And the whisper that drifted through the trees sent a chill down my spine. "See you soon?" I never told him my name. I never even saw his face, but somehow he knew everything about me. It started on a Friday night when I was locking up the bookstore where I worked. The streets were empty, just the distant hum of cars on the highway. As I turned the key, a voice behind me whispered, "Good night, Elena." My blood turned ice. I spun around, but no one was there. Just the wind rustling through the alleyway. I swallowed hard, convincing myself it was a trick of the wind. But as I walked home, the feeling of being watched clawed at my back. When I reached my apartment door, I hesitated. Something felt wrong. I turned the knob slowly, stepping inside, listening for any sign of intrusion. Silence. I locked the door behind me, exhaling sharply. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I imagined it. But then my phone vibrated on the counter. A text from an unknown number. "Did you get home safely, Elena?" I did not respond. Instead, I turned off my phone, placed it face down, and sat on the couch, staring at the dark screen as if it might reveal some kind of hidden answer. Who was watching me? How did they know where I lived? The city was full of strangers, but this one felt like a shadow, lurking just out of sight, always waiting. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. No one had followed me. No one should have known where I lived. My fingers hovered over the keyboard before I locked my phone and shoved it into my pocket. I double-checked the locks, drew the curtains, and tried to shake off the unease settling into my bones. But sleep did not come easy. Every creak of the floorboards, every groan of the pipes made my pulse spike. At 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, a picture. My apartment door, taken from the hallway. I bolted upright, heart hammering against my ribs. I had locked the door. I was sure of it. With shaking hands, I dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, but I could hear the urgency in her tone when she asked, "Are you alone right now?" I swallowed the lump in my throat and whispered, "I do not know." The silence in my apartment stretched unbearably as I listened, ears straining for the sound of something, anything. But there was nothing, just the weight of my own fear pressing down on me. The police arrived within minutes. They searched the building, found nothing, no sign of forced entry, no evidence of an intruder, just an empty hallway and a locked front door. They assured me it was likely a prank, but I saw the way one officer kept glancing at the picture on my phone, his brow furrowed. "If anything else happens, call us immediately." I nodded, but I knew they would not find anything. Whoever this was, they were careful. Too careful. The next morning, I installed extra locks, bought a security camera, and even had my landlord change the front door key. For a while, things were quiet. No texts, no whispers, nothing. Until a week later, when I woke up to find my bedroom window unlocked. I had not opened it, and on the glass, written in the condensation from my breath, were the words, "I found you." My breath hitched, and I stumbled back, heart pounding against my ribs. How? How had they gotten inside? I checked the security footage, hands shaking as I scrubbed through the night's recording. The footage showed me locking the window before bed, then hours of stillness until 3:12 a.m. The screen flickered, static washed over the feed, and then nothing, just blackness for exactly 15 minutes. When the feed returned, the window was unlocked. That was when I packed a bag and left. I did not care where I was going as long as it was far away. I booked a motel 2 towns over, used cash, and turned off my phone. But even then, sleep did not come. The silence felt unnatural, like something was waiting just out of sight. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the motel phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. Then the message notification flashed on the screen. My own voice whispered through the speaker, distorted and wrong. "You cannot run from me, Elena." I smashed the phone off the nightstand and backed against the wall. My breath came in shallow gasps. It was not possible. It was not possible. I had left my phone behind. No one knew I was here. My reflection in the motel mirror caught my eye. My skin was pale, my eyes wide with terror. But then I saw it, the reflection of the bed. The sheets shifted as if someone was sitting there. But when I turned around, the bed was empty, just the imprint of something that had been there. Watching me sleep, I grabbed my bag and ran. I did not stop running until the sun rose. Now, I do not stay anywhere for more than a night. I do not answer unknown calls, and I never, ever sleep at 3:12 a.m. because I know wherever I go, whatever I do, he will find me. Last night, I checked into a roadside motel just outside of town. The room was small, barely more than a bed and a chair. I locked the door, pushed a dresser in front of it, and tried to breathe. But as the clock ticked closer to 3:12 a.m., I felt it again. The shift in the air, the prickling sensation at the back of my neck. I reached for my phone, heart pounding, and then, just as the numbers changed, 3:12 a.m., the screen flickered, and a new message appeared. I am already inside. We had been driving for hours, but the highway never ended. No turns, no exits, just miles and miles of endless road stretching into the dark. At first, we thought we had missed a sign or taken a wrong turn, but the GPS still showed the same route we had started on. My younger brother Daniel was asleep in the back seat, his head pressed against the window. My dad gripped the wheel tighter, his knuckles pale against the leather. "Maybe we should turn around," I suggested, my voice barely above a whisper. He did not answer, just kept his eyes locked on the road ahead. The same cracked asphalt, the same faded white lines, the same trees lining both sides, their gnarled branches stretching toward us like skeletal fingers. The silence between us was suffocating. Then, from the back seat, a sound, a whisper, my name. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. "Daniel?" I turned, my hands gripping the seat, but he was still asleep. His chest rose and fell in slow, steady breaths. My heart pounded. "Dad, did you hear that?" My father did not look at me, but his grip on the wheel tightened. "It is just your imagination," he muttered. But I knew it was not. The voice had been too clear, too deliberate, right next to my ear. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to look back at the road. The sky above us was empty, starless, just an expanse of black stretching forever. I checked my phone. 12:07 a.m., no signal. A chill crept up my spine. We had left home at 8:30 p.m. We should have reached the cabin by 10 o'clock. The road remained the same, an endless loop of monotony. My eyelids grew heavy. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. I leaned against the window, my reflection barely visible in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. Then, suddenly, the radio crackled to life. A burst of static filled the car, followed by a distorted voice, warping in and out. "Stop the car. Stop before it finds you." My blood turned to ice. Dad reached for the dial, twisting it frantically, but the static only grew louder. Daniel stirred in the back seat, his sleepy voice muffled. "What is that noise?" He sat up, rubbing his eyes. Before anyone could answer, the headlights flickered, then cut out completely. The car skidded to a stop. Darkness swallowed us whole. The silence that followed was unnatural, not the stillness of an empty road at night, but something deeper, something wrong. My breathing was loud in my ears. My father's voice was low, steady. "Do not open your door." I did not move. I barely even breathed. Then, from the trees, a sound. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, twigs snapping underfoot. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, but the screen was black, no power, no light, just the suffocating dark pressing against the windows. The footsteps stopped just outside my door. I squeezed my eyes shut. My father gripped my wrist, his voice a whisper. Whatever happens, do not look. A long, scraping noise echoed through the night, metal against metal. My pulse hammered in my ears. Something was outside, dragging its fingers along the car, moving toward the windshield. A shape shifted in the darkness just beyond the glass. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen. Then it spoke, a voice so familiar, so wrong. Let me in. It was my mother's voice, the one we had not heard in years, the one we had buried. Daniel whimpered, pressing himself against the seat. My father's grip tightened. It is not her, he whispered. The voice came again, softer this time. Please, it is so cold out here. My throat burned. My mother had died when I was 10. I had seen her body. I had watched them lower her into the ground. The windshield began to fog. A breath, too warm, too close. A shape pressed against the glass. A shadow, shifting, stretching. Open the door, it whispered. The car groaned, the metal frame trembling like it was being squeezed. My father reached for the keys, his hands shaking. We are leaving. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life. Headlights burst through the darkness, revealing the empty road ahead. The shape outside the car twisted, pulling itself away from the glass, retreating into the shadows. My father slammed his foot on the gas. The tires screeched, the car lunging forward. I dared to look back. For a moment, there was nothing, just the endless road stretching behind us. Then, in the rearview mirror, a figure, standing in the center of the highway, motionless, watching. My mother's face, but not my mother. Her mouth stretched too wide, her eyes hollow and black. My stomach twisted. Do not look, my father repeated, his voice breaking. I turned away, pressing my hands to my ears as the whispers followed us, growing fainter, but never truly gone. The road continued, stretching endlessly before us. No turns, no exits, no end. The car sped forward, but my mind was stuck on what I had just seen. I tried to breathe evenly, to calm my racing heart, but the fear clung to me like a second skin. Daniel sobbed quietly in the back seat. My father kept driving, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly I thought his fingers might snap. The minutes dragged into hours. The clock on the dashboard read 2:43 a.m., yet the night remained the same, unchanging. Then, out of nowhere, we saw it, a gas station. The lights flickered weakly, the sign above it half broken, but it was real, a place, a stop. My father pulled in without a word. The moment the car stopped, he turned to me. "Stay here." His voice was firm, but there was something beneath it, a tremor, fear. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped out. I watched as he approached the store, his shadow stretching long under the dim lights. Daniel sniffled beside me, his voice barely above a whisper. What if it followed us? I did not answer. I did not know. Minutes passed. 10, 15. My father had not returned. The store's interior was dark, too dark. I stared through the windshield, my fingers gripping my jacket. Something was wrong. A shadow flickered at the edge of my vision, near the pumps, moving closer. My breath hitched. I reached for my phone. Dead. The figure stepped into the light. My father. Or at least something that looked like him. Same clothes, same stance, but his eyes, black, hollow. He raised his hand and knocked on the hood of the car, his head tilting. The sound echoed in the silence. Daniel whimpered beside me. "That is not Dad." I knew he was right. I did not move. I did not breathe. The thing that looked like my father grinned, a slow, stretching smile. Then, from behind it, another shadow emerged, and another. More figures, stepping out of the dark, identical, each one wearing his face. My stomach twisted. The real question was not where my father had gone. It was how long we had been driving with something else sitting in the driver's seat. When I arrived at Black Hollow Forest, I thought the rules were nothing more than superstition, a relic from paranoid rangers who had worked this job before me. But now, after 4 nights of hearing footsteps that were not mine, voices that spoke in my own voice, and seeing something in the trees that should not exist, I know the truth. The rules were not there to protect me. They were there to keep something else inside. My name is Daniel Moore. I am 31 years old, and I took this job as a park ranger, thinking it would be peaceful, a break from the stress of city life. It was not. I should have questioned why no one lasted long here, why the ranger before me had disappeared without a trace, leaving only his boots by the lake. But the pay was good, and the job seemed simple. A small wooden station by the lake, a radio for communication, and a laminated card with a list of rules. I remember reading them the first night and laughing. Do not enter the woods after sundown. If you hear your name whispered, ignore it. If you see someone standing by the lake at exactly 2:37 a.m., do not acknowledge them. I thought it was a joke, But that was before I saw the shadow in the trees, before I realized something was watching me from the darkness. The first night was quiet, almost too quiet. No animals, no wind, just the faint, humming sound from the trees. I ignored it at first, thinking it was just my imagination, but around midnight I heard something, footsteps outside the station, slow, deliberate steps circling the cabin. I turned off the lights and looked out the window, but there was nothing there, just darkness and the outline of the trees. Then a knock at the door, not loud, not aggressive, just a soft, rhythmic tapping. My heart pounded. I did not move. My radio crackled to life, and a voice whispered my name. Daniel. My blood ran cold. The radio was not on. It was unplugged. I grabbed my flashlight, shining it toward the door, and for a split second, I saw it. A shadow, impossibly tall, standing just outside the window. It was not moving, but I knew it was watching me. I did not sleep that night. The second night was worse. I was patrolling the trails when I noticed something strange. The trees had shifted. I swear the path I had taken an hour ago was gone, replaced by an unfamiliar clearing. The air felt heavy, charged with something I could not explain. Then I heard it, my own voice, coming from the trees. Daniel, over here. My stomach twisted. It sounded exactly like me, but distorted, stretched out. I gripped my flashlight, scanning the area, but there was no one there. Just the endless forest and the flickering green glow deep within the trees. The humming sound grew louder. I turned and ran, my breath ragged, my legs burning. I made it back to the station, locking the door behind me. My radio was still unplugged, but it crackled again. Why did you run, Daniel? My body went cold. Something was playing with me. The rules said not to acknowledge the voices, not to leave the station after dark. I had already broken one rule by stepping off the marked trail. The feeling of being watched never left me. I kept my flashlight close, my rifle closer, but I knew deep down it would not help me if whatever was out there decided to come inside. By the third night, I was barely holding it together, sleep-deprived, paranoid, feeling like something was watching me at all times. I clutched the laminated rules, reading them over and over. They were my lifeline. But then I saw it. A new rule, one that had not been there before. If you start seeing the shadow, it means you have been marked. Do not leave the station tonight. My hands shook as I dropped the card. That was when I heard it. A scraping sound against the walls of the cabin. slow and deliberate, like nails dragging across wood. I backed away, my breath coming in short gasps. Then the knocking started again, louder this time, more aggressive. And just outside the window, the shadow stood, its head tilting unnaturally, as if it knew. It knew I had seen it. It knew I was afraid. The green glow from the trees pulsed brighter, and the humming turned into a low, vibrating growl. I should have never come here. I should have never ignored the rules, but now it was too late. I was marked, and I knew. Black Hollow Forest was never going to let me leave. The fourth night was the worst. I kept every light in the station on, clutching my rifle, even though I knew deep down it would not help me. I paced back and forth, watching the trees through the window, feeling the weight of unseen eyes pressing down on me. Then, at exactly 2:37 a.m., the air grew still. The trees stopped moving. The humming became deafening, vibrating through my way, and then I saw it, a figure standing by the lake, tall and motionless. It was featureless, just a black void against the silver water. I knew I should not look, but I could not tear my gaze away. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. The lights in the station flickered, then went out completely. I was plunged into darkness. My flashlight died in my hand. The radio crackled again, but this time there was no voice, just static. A thick, suffocating silence filled the air, and then I felt it. A presence behind me. My body went rigid. I could feel cold breath against my neck, something towering over me, unseen but there. The rules, the rules. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the laminated card in my trembling hand. Then, a whisper, so close to my ear, it felt like it was inside my head. Daniel. My stomach dropped. The lights flickered back on, and I spun around. The room was empty. The presence was gone. But the door was open, and just outside, in the darkness of the trees, the shadow stood, watching, waiting. I do not know how much longer I have. The rules keep changing, and I think they are warning me. I found another note this morning, tucked beneath my pillow. It was not part of the original rules, but it was written in the same trembling handwriting. Do not try to leave. You belong to the forest now. I do not know who wrote it. Maybe the last ranger, maybe myself, maybe something else entirely. But I know one thing for certain. I was marked, and Black Hollow Forest does not forgive. You must be the new guy, the man said, adjusting the rusted radio controls. But this tower had been abandoned for years. His uniform was spotless, his face eerily calm. Then, with a quiet smile, he said, "You do not remember, do you?" And for the first time, I felt something I had never felt in these woods, pure terror. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the old fire tower as I adjusted my radio. It was my second week working alone at Hollow Pine National Park, a job that was supposed to be peaceful until that night. The clock read 11:47 p.m. when I first saw him, a lone figure standing at the base of my tower, barely visible through the thick mist rolling in from the forest. His stance was too still, his face obscured by shadow. I felt my stomach tighten. No one was supposed to be here. The last scheduled hiker had checked out hours ago. I reached for my flashlight and leaned over the railing, my breath forming small clouds in the cold night air. "Hey, can I help you?" I called out. The man slowly lifted his head. His uniform caught the moonlight, an old park ranger jacket, neatly buttoned, the fabric looking almost untouched by time. But something about him felt off. The name tag read Carter, but I had never met a Carter. My mind scrambled to recall if he was someone from an earlier shift, maybe a veteran ranger making an unexpected visit. "You must be the new guy," he said, in a voice so calm, so certain, that for a moment I second-guessed myself. My heartbeat quickened. I climbed down cautiously, gripping my flashlight tightly. The closer I got, the stranger he seemed. His uniform bore an emblem I did not recognize. It was the park's logo, but older, outdated. "Something from years ago. Routine checkup on the radio tower," he said. The words made my skin crawl. The radio tower had been abandoned for years. I had checked it myself. Rusted circuits, snapped wires, completely unusable. "Who sent you?" I asked, keeping my distance. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. Just following orders. His voice was almost hypnotic, familiar in a way I could not explain. A sharp gust of wind blew through the clearing, rustling the leaves at our feet. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, but beneath it something metallic lingered. I glanced toward the watchtower, suddenly unsure if I wanted to return to it. "Mind if I take a look inside?" Carter asked. His eyes bore into mine, waiting, watching. Every instinct screamed at me to say no. "Not much to see," I replied. He let out a small chuckle. "Oh, I would not be so sure about that." A shiver ran down my spine. Something about the way he said it felt wrong. I stepped back, my boots crunching against the gravel path, and Carter mirrored my movement perfectly, like a reflection. I swallowed hard. "How long have you been with the Park Service?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "A long time," he said. His smile widened, too much, as if he were amused by something I could not understand. The wind picked up again, stronger this time, carrying a whispering sound through the trees. It almost sounded like my name. I turned toward the radio tower, trying to ground myself. That was when I noticed something that made my breath hitch. The logbook on my desk, open, pages fluttering in the breeze. I had closed it before I came outside. My pulse pounded in my ears as I took slow steps forward. The last entry was not mine. October 12th, 1999. Written in sharp, perfect ink. Beneath it, a name, Silas Carter. My stomach clenched. That was 25 years ago. My flashlight flickered. "Something wrong?" Carter asked behind me, his voice unsettlingly close. I spun around, but he had not moved. His expression was blank, unreadable. My breath came out unsteady. "This tower has been abandoned for years," I said slowly. "No one works this sector but me." Carter tilted his head slightly. "You sure about that?" My grip on the flashlight tightened. "You do not remember, do you?" he continued, stepping forward. My body screamed to run, but my feet refused to move. "Remember what?" My voice barely came out. He did not answer. Instead, he walked past me, fingers grazing the edge of the desk, touching the old radio equipment as if reacquainting himself with it. The static from the radio crackled to life, though I had not touched the dial. A distorted voice came through. My voice. "You must be the new guy." The world tilted. My breath caught in my throat. The radio screeched, the sound warping, turning into something else. A whisper, a murmur, a chorus of voices overlapping. I backed away toward the door, but Carter turned sharply. "Leaving already?" The warmth in his voice was gone, replaced with something colder. I needed to get out. Now. I bolted for the stairs, skipping two at a time, my heart slamming against my ribs. The night air hit me like a punch, and I ran, feet pounding against the dirt path leading away from the tower. The trees closed in around me, the darkness swallowing my vision. I did not look back. Branches scratched at my arms as I tore through the undergrowth. My lungs burned. I did not stop running until I reached the ranger station, throwing the door open and slamming it behind me. I grabbed the emergency radio, my fingers shaking as I turned the dial. "This is Ranger Ethan Collins, Fire Tower 7. I need backup now." The line crackled. Silence. Then, finally, a response. "Ethan?" The voice was familiar, too familiar. Ethan, where have you been? A chill spread through my chest. What do you mean? I have been here, I said. The voice on the other end hesitated. No, Ethan. You have been missing for 3 days. The room spun. My mind raced, grasping for an explanation, for anything that made sense. My reflection in the station's glass window caught my eye. My uniform, torn, dirt-streaked, like I had been wandering through the woods for days. I touched my face. It felt wrong. I grabbed the nearest logbook and flipped to the most recent entry. My hands trembled. The last recorded ranger stationed at Fire Tower 7 was me. But the date read October 15th, 2024. 24. My knees buckled. That was today. And below my name, there was another. Silas Carter. My vision blurred as I stumbled backward, my mind screaming for logic, for reason. The static on the radio surged again. Then I heard it. A whisper, distant but unmistakable. You must be the new guy. The line went dead. There are rules for surviving this place. I followed them until I saw the extra set of footprints following mine. And now, something is waiting outside. It knows my name. It started 2 nights ago when I began my new job as the night ranger at Stillwater National Park. The shift was simple, mostly routine patrols, monitoring cameras, and ensuring no hikers wandered too deep after dark. The park had its fair share of eerie stories, but I never believed them. At least, not until I heard the first knock. At exactly 2:17 a.m., 3 sharp knocks echoed against my cabin door. I had checked the perimeter earlier. No campers, no staff, just me, alone in the wilderness. The air outside was still, too still. I hesitated before reaching for the flashlight and radio. Hello? Anyone out there? My voice sounded smaller than I expected. Silence. But as I took a step forward, my foot hit something just outside the doorway. A single muddy footprint facing mine. It was not there before. I shone my flashlight across the dirt, my breath catching. The ground was undisturbed, except for that one footprint, one that did not belong to me. My stomach twisted. I had been alone all night. I would have seen someone approaching, would have heard them. So how did it get there? I retreated inside, locking the door behind me. The air was thick, pressing against my chest like a weight I could not shake. The cameras showed nothing, just trees, the empty trail, and my own cabin. I forced myself to sit, telling myself it was just paranoia, the isolation playing tricks on my mind. But then I saw it. The northwest camera flickered, static, bleeding across the screen, and when the image returned, there was something new. Footprints, a fresh set, leading from the tree line to my door. They had not been there seconds ago. My radio crackled. "You should not have looked," a voice whispered. My stomach clenched. The voice was mine. I shot up, grabbed my flashlight, and threw the door open. But the footprints, they were gone. The night was eerily quiet, not even a rustling leaf or distant owl. But the trees, they felt wrong, as if they were watching me, waiting. I slammed the door shut, backing away as the radio crackled again. Static hummed. Then my voice returned, but distorted, stretched. "You should not have looked." My own words, but I had never spoken them. The air inside the cabin grew thick with the scent of damp earth, as if the forest itself had crept inside. My pulse pounded as I checked the cameras again. Nothing, just trees. My shaking hands clutched the radio. "Ryan, do you copy?" No response, just more static. Then footsteps. Inside. I turned slowly, my breath catching in my throat. The floor creaked behind me, but the room was empty. At least, it should have been. A whisper brushed against my ear. "Too close. You should not have looked." My own voice. I spun, but there was nothing there. Just the cold, suffocating stillness. Then the knocking returned. Louder this time. More urgent. I backed away, every muscle in my body screaming to run, but there was nowhere to go. The knocking stopped, replaced by slow, deliberate scratches against the door. Deep, dragging sounds, like nails raking over wood. My chest tightened as I stared breathless at the doorknob. It was turning. My grip on the flashlight tightened as I took slow, careful steps backward. The lock clicked. A gust of air, thick with the scent of moss and wet leaves, into the cabin as the door creaked open an inch. My heart pounded against my ribs. I raised the flashlight, ready to see something, anything, but the doorway was empty. Just the dark, yawning forest beyond my porch. And then I noticed something. The footprints were back, but this time they led away from my door, and they were deeper, as if whatever had left them was heavier now, more solid, more real. The radio crackled again. A whisper, barely audible. "Run." The word sent a jolt of fear through my spine. The wind howled through the trees as I stepped back inside, slamming the door shut. I locked it, bolted it, But the fear did not leave. It clung to me like a second skin. The cameras flickered again. One by one, they cut to static until only one remained, the one facing my cabin, and on the screen, standing in the doorway, was me. But I was not moving. I was just standing there, staring. The radio buzzed with static. Then a deep, guttural voice whispered, "You should not have looked." My stomach turned. My hands trembled as I reached for the power switch. But the moment I moved, the figure on the screen moved too, a perfect mirror of me. But then it tilted its head just slightly, and I did not. I stared, unable to breathe. The figure on the screen smiled. My breath caught in my throat. It lifted a hand. I did not. It raised one finger to its lips, a silent warning, or maybe a threat. The lights flickered. My vision swam. The air was too thick, pressing in from all sides. My own reflection in the monitor took a step forward, a single, deliberate step. And then the power cut out. The room plunged into darkness. The only sound was my own ragged breathing. And then, just outside the cabin, a whisper. My voice, but twisted, wrong. You should not have looked. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. My body refused to move, frozen in place by something deeper than fear. The doorknob rattled, once, twice, a slow, patient sound, and then silence. I waited. Seconds stretched into minutes, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. The wind outside had died. Even the forest seemed to be holding its breath. My lungs ached. I had to move. I had to check. Slowly, I reached for the flashlight and clicked it on. The room was empty. The door was locked. Had it ever opened? My mind raced, grasping for an explanation, something that made sense. My gaze flickered to the monitor. The static had returned, erasing any trace of the figure that had been there. But as I turned to check the door, my foot hit something, a single muddy footprint, fresh, facing me. My breath shuddered. The radio crackled one last time. A whisper, so quiet, I almost missed it. See you soon. The screen flickered back to life. Every camera was normal. Every trail was empty. The forest looked untouched. But deep in my gut, I knew this was not over. It had never been over. I was just part of the game now, a piece in something much older, much darker than I could understand. And whatever it was waiting. The cameras were dead. The radio was static. And then I saw it. My reflection, grinning at me from outside the booth. But I had not moved. The shift was supposed to be easy, just watching the perimeter and making sure no one sneaked in. That is what I told myself when I took this job. But as the nights went by, the unease in my gut grew, twisting tighter with every passing shift. My name is Daniel Carter, 22 years old, a college student who needed extra cash for tuition. When I got the job as a night security guard at the Maplewood Research Outpost, I thought it was perfect. A quiet, remote facility, a small team, and most importantly, no real work. Just sit in the booth, monitor the cameras, and report if anyone came near the restricted area. But by the third night, I knew something was wrong. I noticed the first sign when I checked the security feed at around 2:23 a.m. A shadow moved by the northern gate. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but I knew the cameras should not pick up movement when nothing was there. I leaned closer, adjusting the focus, and that is when I saw myself, standing outside the booth, looking in. For a moment, my mind refused to process what I was seeing. The figure was wearing my jacket, my badge, even the same expression I had just a second ago. But I was inside. My breath caught in my throat as the lights inside the booth flickered. The radio crackled, and through the static, a voice came through. "Daniel, come outside." My entire body went ice cold. It was my voice, the same cadence, the same tone, a perfect mimicry. I turned my head slowly towards the door. It was locked, but the handle, it was turning. I grabbed the bat I kept under the desk and backed against the wall, heart hammering against my ribs. "I know you are in there," the voice said again, still mine. My hand hovered over the emergency alarm, but as soon as my finger brushed the button, the security monitors flickered back on. My reflection on the screen smiled at me, then disappeared into the darkness. My breathing was erratic as I reached for my phone. My hands trembled as I typed a message to Elena, the other night guard. But the second I hit send, the screen of my phone glitched. The text erased itself. The message thread was empty, as if I had never typed anything at all. The next morning, I told Elena, who was 26, ex-military, someone who had seen enough in life not to flinch at ghost stories. But as soon as I mentioned seeing my double, her face darkened. "Pack your stuff. Quit today," she said, voice dead serious. I laughed nervously, thinking she was messing with me. But then she showed me something on her phone, a grainy image from the week before. Another security guard, standing in the same spot by the booth. Only that guard had been missing for 2 weeks. They see themselves before they go, she whispered, eyes locked on mine. That night, I arrived for my shift, every nerve in my body on edge. The cameras were glitching, the lights in the facility hallway flickered, and at exactly 2:23 a.m., the static returned to the radio. Daniel, open the door. I did not move. Daniel, you are already outside. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to look at the screen. The figure was closer now, its face blurry, shifting. Not quite me anymore, its mouth twisted into something unnatural, a stretched-out grin. I turned off the radio and reached for my phone to text Elena, but before I could type, the emergency alarm went off on its own. The loud, piercing sound shattered the silence, and my hands shook as I tried to turn it off. Then, a knock on the glass. I stopped breathing. The thing stood right outside the booth now, the only barrier between us, thin glass and a locked door. It tilted its head, watching, waiting. I tried to step back, but something cold brushed against my shoulder. My blood ran ice cold. The booth was empty. I was alone. I spun around, heart pounding in my ears. But there was no one. My mind screamed at me to run, to get the hell out of that place. But my legs refused to move. The thing outside reached for the door handle, twisting it slowly. The lights cut out completely. The security screens flashed, and for one split second, I saw dozens of reflections, all staring, not mine, not human, watching, waiting, smiling. The next thing I remember, it was morning. I was outside the booth, standing barefoot in the dirt. The front gate was wide open, and the air was freezing. Elena found me there, eyes glazed over like I had been in a trance. She did not ask me what happened. She just shoved my bag into my arms and told me to leave. Do not look back, she said. I never went back to Maplewood. To this day, I still avoid mirrors at night. Sometimes, when I am alone, I hear static in my ears. Sometimes, I catch a glimpse of my reflection moving when I do not. And sometimes, late at night, I get a text from an unknown number that says, Daniel, come outside. A few days after I left, I got a call from Elena. Her voice was strained, shaken in a way I had never heard before. Daniel, she whispered, someone else took your shift. He went missing last night. They found his boots, but not him. My stomach dropped. And the worst part, she continued. His security footage. It shows him inside the booth, but outside the glass there were two reflections. The call ended. I stared at my phone, heart hammering as a notification appeared. New message from unknown number. Daniel, come outside. I shut my phone off. I moved to a different town, took a job at a crowded diner, surrounded by people. I never worked nights again, but sometimes, when I look in a mirror for too long, I swear I see someone else looking back, and sometimes it smiles. The radio crackled to life, its static breaking the heavy silence of the forest. You need to run. My stomach knotted. The voice was my own. I gripped the receiver, my pulse hammering against my ribs. My name is Daniel Hayes, 32 years old, a fire lookout stationed at Black Hollow National Park. I had spent 3 months in isolation, monitoring the forest for fires, logging weather conditions, and occasionally reporting lost hikers. The job was peaceful, predictable, but tonight something had shifted. It started at 1:57 a.m. when I first heard the transmission. Static at first, then a faint whisper that made my skin prickle. You need to run. The voice was not just familiar, it was identical to mine. My fingers trembled over the dial as I adjusted the frequency. My breath caught in my throat. Who is this? My voice came out hoarse. Silence. Then a sharp click, like someone letting go of the transmitter. I stared at the radio, my mind racing. There was no one within miles of me. The nearest ranger station was 10 miles away, and I had spoken to them just before nightfall. I glanced at the window, expecting to see only darkness, but the trees, something about them, looked different. Shadows moved where they should not have. A gust of wind rattled the windows, making the whole tower groan like a living thing. I pushed away from the desk, knocking over my coffee in the process. The scalding liquid spread across my logbook, staining the pages. My hands were slick with sweat as I reached for my flashlight. Then the knock came, a deep, deliberate sound against the base of the tower. My breath hitched. No one should be here. The knock came again, slow and rhythmic, 3 precise raps, like someone testing if I was alone. I forced my feet to move, creeping toward the window. The night outside was dense, the moonlight barely breaking through the towering pines. And then I saw him, a man standing at the base of my tower. He was wearing a ranger uniform identical to mine. Same dark green jacket, same badge. But the way he stood was wrong. His head was tilted slightly upward, just enough for me to see the faint outline of his features. my breath caught in my throat. He had my face. The radio buzzed again. "Do not open the door." My own voice, sharper this time, filled with panic. I stumbled backward, knocking over my chair. My mind fought to rationalize what I was seeing, but my body screamed danger. The figure below moved, slowly. One step, then another. The wooden stairs creaked under his weight. I grabbed the emergency flashlight and bolted for the back door. The tower's structure trembled with each step he took, like the very foundation of the place was rejecting him. I fumbled with the lock, yanking the heavy metal latch open. Cold air rushed in, chilling my sweat-drenched skin. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my boots slamming against the wood. My truck was parked at the base of the lookout, about half a mile down the trail. I just needed to make it there. The moment my foot hit the dirt, the tower lights flickered and died. The forest was silent, unnaturally so. No wind, no insects, just an oppressive stillness that made my ears ring. I turned back, expecting to see the man still on the stairs, but the tower was empty. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth as I sprinted through the trail. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I did not dare slow down. The path twisted through the trees, the beam of my flashlight bouncing wildly. Every few steps, I swore I heard footsteps behind me, perfectly mirroring mine. Then the voice returned. "You should not have run." It was right behind me. I spun around, my flashlight shaking in my grip. My own face stared back at me from just a few feet away, lips curled into an unnatural grin. It was not a reflection. I ran. Branches lashed at my arms as I tore through the underbrush, veering off the trail. I did not care where I was going. I just needed to get away. My mind screamed for logic, but all I could think about was that thing wearing my face, speaking in my voice. The truck was close. I could see the glint of moonlight on the windshield through the trees. My fingers fumbled for the keys in my pocket as I closed the distance. But something was wrong. The doors were open, and someone was sitting in the driver's seat. I stopped dead in my tracks, my stomach twisting. The figure in the truck turned its head slowly, staring at me. The dim glow from the dashboard illuminated my own face, staring back at me. It smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent ice-cold fear through my veins. "You left the door open, Daniel." The words came from my own lips, spoken in my voice. I took a shaky step backward, but the figure in the truck did not move. I forced myself to think, my heart pounding in my ears. I needed to get out of here, but every instinct told me that running had been the mistake. Then I saw it. a shape in the rearview mirror, behind me. I barely had time to react before a cold hand clamped down on my shoulder. Everything went dark. The first time I saw my name scratched into the bark of a tree, I assumed it was a coincidence, a trick of the mind. Maybe another Ethan had been here before me. But when I found it again, deeper in the forest, paired with the words, "Do you remember me?" my blood ran cold. I had never been here before. At least, not that I could recall. I work as a night ranger at Black Hollow National Park. A simple job, mostly monitoring cameras, keeping an eye on any lost hikers, and making sure no one sneaks in after dark. It is a lonely shift, but I do not mind. The forest at night is a different world, a quieter, heavier place where time stretches and sounds carry in unnatural ways. My co-worker Ryan works at the main gate while I stay in the ranger's station. We check in with each other every hour. It is an easy routine. At least it was, until I found the writing on the tree. That night, my shift started like any other, a thermos full of coffee, my radio crackling every now and then, and a grainy black and white view of the park from the camera monitors. Midnight came and went, a quiet night, until 2:37 a.m., when something on the northwest camera caught my attention. A person, no backpack, no flashlight, standing just outside the tree line. I leaned closer, trying to make out details. The figure did not move. They stood there, frozen, facing the camera. Their clothes looked old, faded, almost like they had been out in the elements for too long. I reached for my radio, about to inform Ryan, when the figure did something that made my stomach drop. They lifted their hand and pointed directly at the lens. My name was on the tree behind them. Ethan. A cold wave of unease washed over me. How did they know my name? I blinked, and the camera glitched. When the image cleared, the figure was gone. I rewound the footage, but it was as if they had never been there. I had never seen interference like that before. My hands were clammy, my heartbeat uneven. I kept staring at the screen, half expecting the figure to reappear, but nothing happened. Only the trees stood still, indifferent, as if they had never been disturbed. I did not want to step outside, but I had to. I grabbed my flashlight, checking my radio one last time. "Ryan, you there?" His response was immediate. "Yeah, all good. Bored out of my mind. You?" I hesitated, staring at the dark outline of the trees just beyond the station. Thought I saw something weird on the cameras. Probably nothing, but I am going to check it out. Ryan chuckled, oblivious to the dread coiling in my chest. "You better not get eaten by a bear, man." I forced a laugh and stepped outside. The air was heavy, damp with the scent of moss and earth. My boots crunched against the dirt as I approached the tree. The closer I got, the more I saw the details I had missed on the camera. The name was carved deep, jagged, as if done in a hurry. Below it, the words, "Do you remember me?" The letters looked fresh, the bark still raw and bleeding sap. My fingers hovered over the grooves, a faint, twisted familiarity stirring in the back of my mind. Before I could dwell on it, a branch snapped behind me. I turned, flashlight beam cutting through the trees. Nothing, just the quiet rustling of leaves. Then, in the distance, footsteps, slow, deliberate. My breath hitched. "Ryan, I think someone is out here." Silence. The radio was dead. Static filled the channel where his voice should have been. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I backed away, moving toward the station, my heart hammering against my ribs. The flashlight flickered. The shadows between the trees deepened, shifting, stretching toward me. Then, just as suddenly as they started, the footsteps stopped. I stood there, frozen, waiting, listening. A whisper cut through the silence. "You do not remember, but I do." The voice was not Ryan's. It was not even close. It was mine, my own voice, distorted, stretched thin with something inhuman beneath it. Panic surged through me. I bolted for the station, slamming the door behind me and locking it. My hands shook as I reached for the radio. "Ryan, are you there?" Nothing. Just static. I checked the monitors. The northwest camera was black. I switched to another. The same thing. Each feed cut out one by one until only one remained. The feed showed the ranger's station, my station. I was on the screen, standing in the doorway, but I was not moving. My reflection in the camera was not mirroring me. It was just standing there, staring at me. And then it smiled. The power flickered. The room plunged into darkness. I fumbled for the emergency flashlight. Breath caught in my throat. A slow, deliberate knock echoed against the door. 3 times. My stomach clenched. I turned back to the screen. The figure in the camera had moved closer. It was no longer in the doorway. It was inside. The last thing I heard before the radio cut out completely was my own voice whispering, "Do you remember me now?" The station light buzzed and flickered violently, then cut out completely. My breathing turned shallow. I had nowhere to go. The room had never felt so small. Then a slow creak came from behind me. I spun around, shining my flashlight wildly. The chair in the corner rocked slightly, as if someone had just been sitting there. My radio crackled back to life. Ryan's voice, but it was wrong, hollow. "Ethan, open the door." My blood turned to ice. The voice was too flat, too empty. I stayed still, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline. Then the doorknob began to turn. I backed up against the wall, my pulse hammering in my ears. The whisper came again, softer now. "You do not remember, but you will." The temperature in the room plummeted. My breath came out in white puffs. Then the lights flickered back on. The monitors flashed to life. The cameras showed nothing but an empty forest, the trees swaying gently in the wind. The name on the tree was gone. The words had vanished. The door was still locked. My radio buzzed. "Ethan, what the hell happened? I lost contact with you for a few minutes." Ryan sounded normal again. I swallowed hard, staring at the door. "Nothing, just a system glitch." I forced a laugh. "All good now." But as I turned back to the monitors, the screen showed a single image before cutting to static, a reflection, my own, watching me from the trees. I was supposed to find those missing kids. Instead, I found their backpacks, torn open, covered in deep claw marks, and the sound of something breathing right behind me. There are places in the world where people disappear without a trace. I learned that the hard way. I am Daniel Grayson, 34 years old, a senior park ranger stationed in Black Hollow National Park, a remote stretch of wilderness known for its towering trees and dense, suffocating silence. I had been on the job for nearly a decade, handling lost hikers, minor search and rescue operations, and the occasional animal sighting, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the events of September 17th, 2021. That was the day a routine missing persons case turned into my worst nightmare. It started with a 911 call from a frantic father. His son, Ethan Caldwell, a 10-year-old boy, had gone missing while hiking with his family. The details were unsettling. One moment, Ethan was walking behind them on the trail, talking about the birds he saw. The next, he was gone. No sound. No cry for help. Just gone. Search teams were dispatched immediately. Helicopters scanned the area. Drones mapped the forest. K-9 units tracked his scent, but it led nowhere. It was as if he had walked off the face of the earth. The weirdest part? Ethan was not the first. Over the past 5 years, 6 other children had vanished within a 5-mile radius of Black Hollow. No bodies, no remains, no evidence. Just whispers of an old legend, stories passed down by the local hunters, warning about a vanishing trail, a path deep in the woods where the trees grew too close together, where the air felt heavier, where people who wandered too far were never seen again. I never believed in folklore, but when I found Ethan's red backpack hanging from a branch 15 feet in the air, I started to doubt everything I knew about the world. I stood beneath the tree, staring at the backpack swaying in the wind. There was no logical reason for it to be up there. It was too high for a child to have thrown it, too perfectly placed for an animal to have dragged it. My radio crackled to life, startling me. "Daniel, do you copy?" It was my partner, Mark Ellis, a fellow ranger who had been with me on previous cases. I pressed the button, my voice uneasy. "I found something, but you need to see this yourself." Mark arrived 10 minutes later, out of breath from the hike. He looked up at the backpack and let out a low whistle. Jesus, how the hell did it get up there? I shook my head. That's what I'm trying to figure out. We retrieved the bag and searched its contents. Inside, we found a granola bar, a half-empty water bottle, and a note stuffed deep into the side pocket. A note that made my blood run cold. It was written in jagged, uneven handwriting. 4 words. He walks when it's quiet. Mark and I exchanged uneasy glances. "Who wrote this?" he muttered. The note was old, yellowed at the edges, as if it had been sitting there for years. But that did not make sense. This was Ethan's backpack. It had his name written inside. My gut told me we were missing something, a detail, a pattern, a warning. Then the radio crackled again, but this time it was not from our team. A voice, distorted and hollow, whispered through the static, "Leave." Mark and I stood frozen. The air around us felt thicker, heavier, suffocating. I turned slowly, sweeping my flashlight through the trees. That was when I saw the footprints, small ones, barely visible in the dirt. But they did not lead away. They circled, around and around in tight, erratic loops, as if Ethan had been pacing, or if something had been walking in his shape. My instincts screamed at me to get out, but before I could speak, Mark gasped, "Dan, look at the trees." I followed his gaze and felt the blood drain from my face. Carved into the bark of the trees surrounding us were names, 7 of them. Ethan Caldwell. And beneath his name, the date, September 17th, the same day he went missing. The other names? They matched the previous missing children. Dates spanning back decades. Someone had been keeping track or something. My hand shook as I reached for my radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Grayson. We need immediate backup. This is not a false alarm." Static, The same eerie silence filled the air. Then the voice returned, clear and slow this time. "You should not be here." A branch snapped behind us. The breathing started, deep, slow, and deliberate. My flashlight flickered as I turned. Something stood between the trees. A shape, a figure, too tall, too thin, its head tilted unnaturally to the side. It did not move, it only watched. My heart pounded against my ribs as I grabbed Mark's arm. "We are leaving, now." We backed away, step by step, careful not to turn our backs. The figure never moved, never spoke, never blinked. But the breathing followed. It was in our heads, inside our lungs. The moment we stepped out of the tree line, the air lightened. The pressure lifted. The figure was gone, just like Ethan. We never found him. Just like the others before him, Ethan Caldwell's case was declared unsolved. Another name added to the list. Another family left without answers. I quit my job a week later. Mark did too. The forest rangers who replaced us, they do not talk about what happened that night. They pretend it was just another disappearance. But I know the truth. Something lives in Black Hollow. Something waits. It walks when it is quiet. And I pray no one else ever hears it breathing. Hello guys, which story scared you the most? Let me know in the comments. And thanks for listening, everyone. If you stuck around until the end, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. As always, I'm looking for more story ideas, so drop a comment below with any themes or experiences you'd like to hear next. Stay safe out there, and until next time, keep your eyes open.